the end of Daniel in some ways sums up all that we've already been through. So I'd like to recap a bit. We've been through effectively through 9 chapters, starting off with Babylon, where we meet Daniel and his friends for the first time. Then Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, the dream of the statue, then the story of the fiery furnace, then the dream of the tree growing and being felled, then Belshazzar's feast, then the lion's den, and then we had the visions in chapter 7 and 8, which started to get a bit complicated, the visions of the beasts, and then Daniel's prayer that Mel led us through last week. Now, over the recent centuries, folk, whoops, that was the title. Okay, folk have tried to put some structure to this. What's this all about? And they divided it up in a number of ways. First of all, the obvious ways, you can divide it up into a set of stories about Daniel and then a set of visions at the end. They've also thought about, and there's one of the visions of the goat doing nasty things to the ram in chapter 7. Then people tried to divide it up by the language it was written in. Now, this is actually a bit important, I think. The first chapter's in Hebrew. The second to the 7th is in Aramaic, and the last few are in Hebrew again. Aramaic seems to be being the language of the Persian court. And there are 2 sets of scripts of Hebrew and Aramaic, and I'm sure some amongst you can tell me which is which, but I wouldn't have a clue, to be honest. But notice these 2 schemes don't quite match up. It's a bit messy. And then people started to look at the contents of the various chapters and began to pick up some sort of structure. Now, this is where it might get a bit lectury, I'm afraid. What they noticed was a sort of structure in the Aramaic bit. The start and the end, there were similar sorts of prophecies of the kingdoms, the 4 kingdoms, or the 3 kingdoms, or the 2 kingdoms. Then, sort of in between that, there were stories of persecution in the lion's den, the fiery furnace. And then right in the middle, there were stories I've labelled C of effectively pride and fall and arrogance. And I think it's generally accepted now that this structure is real. I'm sure some of you who know better will correct me if I say this wrongly. It's a chiastic structure. I have no idea how that word is said because I've never said it before. I've only ever seen it written. So I may or may not be right in saying that. And this structure is actually, it comes up a few times in scripture. And if you look a bit wider, you can see the surrounding bits in Hebrew, are about purification. And so you can add another one to it, if you like, another layer. So this is generally accepted. I'm really quite proud though, because I managed to put the letter P to each of them. So the P is my innovation. So that's my contribution to the good of humanity and Daniel's scholarship, really. Why say something about this? It all looks a bit airy-fairy. I think the people who read Daniel would actually have understood this sort of thing. They'd have been looking out for it. It would have been within their mindset to look out for. And what it's showing them is the structure and the important things of the book. And this is, I think, perhaps why it's a bit important for us, because it shows us what the author was trying to get at. So prophecy, persecution and protection, arrogance and pride and fall. And these are the sort of, if you like, the eternal themes. I sent you, as a bit of a joke some time ago, a link about chapter 5, Belshazzar's feast, and all the numerology there is in that. And you think, well, good grief, that's a bit weird. But again, they would have read it with a very different mindset, a mindset that says letters can stand for numbers. And that was quite common in the ancient world. So when we read Daniel, we read it in actually missing out a lot of the literary conventions that were sort of ingrained within people they were reading. But if we look at this particular convention, it says something about what the writer considered important. And look at it in another way, and here we can look at the two outer chapters as being some sort of commissioning, then something ultimately about God's kingdom in the prophecies, then something about idolatry in the stories of persecution and protection. That's what it was about, really, because Daniel and his friends refused to conform to the idolatry. And then in the middle, something about what I've called profanation, profaning the sacred vessels, becoming like God in the case of Nebuchadnezzar. And these are themes that we'll see actually repeated in what follows. So that's a sort of structure. I'm sorry if it's a bit heavy. But when we come down to chapter 10, we can see in chapters 10 to 12, these same themes sort of repeated. If you like, it's taking the big picture that the author and Daniel have been talking about and applying them to the specific situation they were in. So again, a commissioning in chapter 10 that we'll see. Again, in chapter 11, a prophecy, a historical record, and then persecution and protection, more about God's kingdom in chapter 12. Let's look at those chapters 10 and 12 in particular. Could I ask somebody, please, and I can only see one screen, but if somebody could jump in and read to us Daniel chapter 10, you should have it on your sheet. It will be on the screen for you as well. Somebody there?
In the third.
All right, there you go.
No, I'll stop. Somebody else do it.
Okay. In the 3rd year of King Cyrus of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. The word was true, and it concerned a great conflict. He understood the word, having received understanding in the vision. At that time, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 weeks. I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine had entered my mouth, and I had not anointed myself at all for the full 3 weeks. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was standing on the back of the great river, that is, the Tigris, I looked up and saw a man clothed in linen, with a belt of gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the roar of a multitude. I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. The people who were with me did not see the vision, though a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone to see this great vision. My strength left me, and my complexion grew deathly pale, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and when I heard the sound of his words, I fell into a trance, face to the ground.
More, Mel, next on the next.
Okay. He said to me, Daniel, greatly beloved, pay attention to the words that I am going to speak to you. Stand on your feet, for I have now been sent to you. So while he was speaking this word to me, I stood up trembling. He said to me, do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia opposed me 21 days. So Michael, one of the chief princes, came to me, and I left him there with the prince of the kingdom of Persia. and have come to help you understand what is to happen to your people at the end of days. For there is a further vision for those days. While he was speaking these words to me, I turned my face toward the ground and was speechless.
Thank you, Mel. Oh, sorry, there is yet another.
Shall I carry on?
Yes, please. Sorry.
That's okay. Then one in human form touched my lips, and I opened my mouth to speak, and said to the one who stood before me, "My Lord, because of the vision, such pains have come upon me that I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For I am shaking, no strength remains in me, and no breath is left in me." Again, one in human form touched me and strengthened me. He said, "Do not fear, greatly beloved. You are safe. Be strong and courageous." When he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, "Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." Then he said, "Do you know why I have come to you? Now I must return to fight against the Prince of Persia, and when I am through with him, the Prince of Greece will come. But I am to tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is no one with me who contends against these princes except Michael, your prince."
And that, I think, is it. Let's look at this again. I've highlighted some words here. They're really 8 memoirs for me as much as anything. King Cyrus of Persia was the king who actually allowed the Jews to go back to Jerusalem. So actually, people were actually returning to Judea at the time that this story is set. The time is given as the 24th day of the first month, when Daniel was fasting, eating no rich food. That is actually during the feast of Passover, when you would normally be expecting some sort of blowout feasting, really. So Daniel was actually deliberately not doing so. And he saw a vision which we take to be an angel. I'm sure there's a load of symbolism written within that. And here we meet, well, we've met already a little bit in the last chapter, the angel Gabriel. Angels, heavenly beings other than God, were around through most of the Old Testament time, but not terribly well defined in many ways. We read in the early books, the early traditions of the angel of the Lord. During the exile and after the exile, they seem to take on a more definitive appearance, and people attributed various qualities to them. And here we see an angel, an unnamed angel. Daniel, again, you remember last week, was called greatly beloved. Not many people in the Bible are called greatly beloved. Moses is one of them. Jesus is another. And again, the next words, "Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you're set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before God, your words have been heard." Again, this follows on from something Mel said when Daniel's prayer was said to have been answered from the moment he started to pray. And here again, now we meet Michael, one of the chief princes, who seems to have been the protector, the guardian angel of Israel. That's how he was regarded. And Michael, of course, crops up again later in this story and in the New Testament in the book of Revelation. And so we have Gabriel, we have Michael, and there's also Raphael and Uriel, which come up in a couple of apocryphal books as well. And they're all nicely illustrated on the Reredos at church, of course. So the angel speaks, and then at the end we have the angel saying he's going to fight against the Prince of Persia, and when that's done, the Prince of Greece will come, and there's no one there with me except Michael. And that leads into the highly complex story of chapter 11. I hope you'll have appreciated why I didn't include chapter 11 to be read when I actually put the readings together on the sheet. It's terribly complicated. Here in chapter 11, we see a prophecy written down of the rise and the fall of the fall of the Persian kingdom, the rise of the Greek kingdom, the splitting of the Greek kingdom, and ultimately coming to the troubles that were facing the people of the Jews, the people of Jerusalem, at the particular time referred to. So let's give you an idea. That's the Persian Median Empire, 400 to 500 BC. You can see it's really very sizable. Alexander the Great did nothing at all for that. In a very short space of time, he conquered a massive area of the Middle East and died actually quite young, and his empire was split into a number of different empires under his generals. The ones that concern us were the Seleucid Empire, which effectively took in much of what was Persia at the time, but ruled by a Greek ruling caste, so about 200 BC, and the Ptolemaic Empire. Ptolemy, ultimately the Ptolemaic dynasty would come to its climax in Cleopatra and all the stories that surround her. So in chapter 11, we see the king of the north, that is the Seleucids, in battle with the kings of the south, the Ptolemies. And right in the middle of that, we have Jerusalem and Judea, the main battleground, basically. And scholars would say that the book of Daniel was constructed with sort of prophecy after the event, if you like, predicting these battles, ending up in a climactic battle around 170 BC or something like that. It really isn't so straightforward. There's some indication that the book of Daniel was seen by Alexander and taken by him as a prophecy of his rise and fall. That, I think, is in Josephus. Some of the prophecies can't actually be tied up with any secular history because they're the sole source. And some of them are a bit fuzzy and not quite right. So it's not quite as simple and straightforward as some scholars would care to make out, I don't think. But it does end up with this guy, and this guy had a nose, no doubt, when he was actually carved. Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and he was one of the Seleucids, and he won many battles, and he got a bit delusional, as you can see from some of his coins there. King Antiochus Epiphanes, God manifest, bearer of victory. And if you know some of the symbolism of coins, he's almost taking deity upon himself. And there we can see the strictures of the early chapters of Daniel again being applied, of profanation and of idolatry. And he set up within the temple some sort of idol, possibly Zeus, it's not quite known, and required people to worship it. And that led to a massive revolt, to the revolt of the Maccabees. And if you want a good tale of war and daring do and all sorts of things, read the books of the Maccabees and the Apocrypha. And these culminated in the victory of Judas Maccabeus, bottom right, over Antiochus Epiphanes. and the restoration of the worship in the temple. And so that's what the book of chapter 11 was all about. And it was about the arrogance of somebody setting up themselves as God, setting up an idol in the temple. It's about pride, and it's about fall, picking up the earlier themes. But it sort of moves on, and there's a turning point somewhere in that chapter, and people can't decide where it begins to look way beyond history. And that brings us to chapter 12, the epilogue. And here we find again the themes of persecution and protection, the themes of God's kingdom that we actually met in, say, the story of the statue being destroyed by the stone that represented the kingdom of God, and so on. And again, it's to be read. As Ted volunteered first time round, I'll ask Ted, could you actually read this again for us, please? And it will be on the screen, and I hope I'll get all the chapters, all the bits there. Ted.
At that time, Michael, the great prince, the protector of your people, shall arise. There shall be a time of anguish such as has never occurred since the nations first came into existence. But at that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone who is found written in the book, everyone who is found in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, keep the word secret and the book sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be running back and forth, and evil shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and two others appeared, one standing on this bank of the stream and one on the other. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was upstream, "How long shall it be until the end of these wonders?" The man clothed in linen who was upstream raised his right hand, sorry, Chris, you're in the way, toward heaven. And I heard him swear by the one who lives forever that it would be for a time, 2 times and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be accomplished. I heard but could not understand. So I said, "My Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things?" He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are to remain secret and sealed until the end of time. Many shall be purified, cleansed, and refined, but the wicked shall continue to act wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that desolates it is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Happy are those who persevere and attain the 1,335 days. But you go your way and rest. You shall rise for your reward at the end of the days."
Thank you, Ted. Gets weirder, doesn't it? Michael, again, the great prince, the protector of the people. The protector of the people of Israel came to be, in Christian thought, the protector of the church, and gradually transformed in Christian thought into what's known as a psychopomp, somebody who cares for the dead. The prediction of the time of anguish, a time of great persecution. Now we're looking forward in time. We're not specifically looking towards the time of Antiochus. Then many of those who sleep shall awake. Here we get one of the earliest in scripture, really, the definite statements about resurrection. In the Old Testament, the fate of the dead was in general that of a sort of ghostly existence in Sheol. But here we have the first indication of resurrection and judgment. More angels appear in verse 5, and then the words Daniel utters, one of them utters, "How long shall it be until the end of these wonders?" How long? Words the disciples said to Jesus, I think, about one of his prophecies. The angel who we see raised his right hand and his left, and that's a rather odd gesture. It's taken normally to confirm something is true, you would raise your right hand, and here he seems to be emphasizing it, both hands to heaven. Daniel says again those words, what will be the outcome? And he gets a rather negative reply. The wicked shall continue being wicked, the pure shall be pure. The wicked won't understand, the wise will. And then again, in some way, an echo of what's been said, the abomination that desolates will be set up for a period of a really weird number of days that might no doubt made sense to people at the time, doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And then I find it ends in rather a low-key way, and sort of ambivalent way. Go your way, rest. You shall rise for your reward at the end of days. Sort of put this on the back burner. It's going to happen. And so what I've tried to show is how chapters 10 and 12 sort of take what's been written and sort of in chapters 1 to 9 and sort of sum it up into the present circumstances that they were in. But it went further, of course. Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man, the title Daniel uses. He uses the words abomination of desolation, probably referring to the Roman who would be the Emperor Titus, certainly refers to the end times. Paul again refers in his letters to the end times, and the book of Revelation is in some ways a rewriting and an expansion of the book of Daniel. They're tied together. Brings us to the questions I'd like to put in a while. I'll read these when we get to them. I say angels, a symbol or a reality? Perhaps more profitably, we could ask, how does God communicate with us today? Prophecy, I ask, provocatively, foretelling or forthtelling? How can we be prophetic today? The end times, I ask, a reality or a metaphor? A hope for a future or an escape from reality?